The Crimson Warning Captain Nora Blackwood stood at the observation deck of the UES Phantom, watching the stars drift by in their eternal dance. The coffee in her hands had grown cold, but she barely noticed. Something felt wrong tonight, a tension in the void that made her scars ache with phantom pain. "Captain," Lieutenant James Rivera's voice cut through her thoughts, soft but urgent. "We're receiving a distress signal from New Geneva Colony." Nora turned to face her second-in-command, noting the way his dark eyes reflected her own concern. James had been with her for 3 years now, and she'd learned to read every subtle shift in his expression. This wasn't just worry, this was fear. "Put it through," she commanded, following him to the bridge. The transmission crackled to life, filled with static and screaming. Through the chaos, a desperate voice broke through. "Under attack! Ships everywhere! They're burning the settlements! Please, someone help us!" The signal cut to black. Nora's hands tightened on the command chair. New Geneva was only 4 light hours away, close enough to reach, too far to have prevented whatever was happening. "James, set course for New Geneva. Maximum burn." "Already plotted, Captain," he replied, their minds working in perfect synchronization as always. As the Phantom leaped forward, another transmission flooded their screens, but this one was different. Crystal clear, broadcasting on all frequencies with the arrogance of absolute power. A towering figure appeared on screen, his scaled skin gleaming purple-black under harsh lights. Commander Zex Korthak of the Hegemony Empire, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of dominance, his 3 eyes burning with cruel satisfaction. "Humans of this pathetic sector," Korthak's voice boomed through the bridge, "witness the price of defiance. New Geneva burns as a lesson to all who dare exist without our permission." The image shifted to show orbital bombardment, streams of plasma fire raining down on civilian settlements. Buildings melted like candles. Gardens that had taken decades to cultivate turned to ash in moments. Through it all, tiny figures ran screaming through the streets, their lives snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. Nora's breath caught in her throat. The flames, the running figures, it was her homeworld all over again. She was 7 years old, hiding in the cellar while raiders burned her family's farm, her parents' screams echoing through the night. A warm hand touched her shoulder. James stood beside her, his presence steady and grounding. "Nora," he whispered, using her first name despite the bridge full of crew, a breach of protocol that spoke volumes about his concern. She leaned into his touch for just a moment, drawing strength from his warmth before straightening. "Continue the transmission," she ordered. Korthak's image returned, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your species has existed in our galaxy for too long without proper submission. Consider this your final warning. Kneel before the Hegemony Empire. Surrender your fleets and colonies or face the same fate as New Geneva. You have 72 hours to respond." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. "Captain," Ensign Torres spoke up from communications, "we're receiving similar reports from across the Outer Rim. At least 12 colonies have gone dark in the past 6 hours. Nora closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders like lead. When she opened them, James was watching her with those steady brown eyes that had become her anchor in countless storms. "Set course for Earth," she commanded, "and send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them." She paused, remembering the flames, the screams, the arrogance in Korthak's voice. "Tell them the galaxy just made a very dangerous mistake." As the Phantom turned toward home, Nora stood at the viewport once more. But this time, she wasn't watching the stars drift peacefully by. She was calculating trajectories, remembering old tactical manuals, and feeling something cold and sharp awakening in her chest. The Hegemony thought humanity would kneel. They expected fear, panic, desperate pleas for mercy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Behind her, James moved closer, his voice low and meant only for her ears. "Whatever happens next, Nora, you won't face it alone." She turned to meet his gaze, seeing her own determination reflected there. "I know," she whispered back. "That's what scares them most about us, James. We don't fight alone. We never have." The stars grew brighter as they raced toward Earth, carrying with them news of war and the promise of humanity's answer. The silence before the storm had begun. Hearts in the shadow. The war room beneath Luna Base hummed with tension as holographic displays showed the devastation across human space. 17 colonies gone dark. Millions of lives snuffed out in a matter of hours. Admiral Diana Cross stood at the center of it all, her weathered face carved from stone as she studied the tactical displays. "Captain Blackwood, your report," Cross commanded as Nora entered the secured chamber. Nora's voice was steady, professional, but James could hear the tremor of controlled rage beneath. "New Geneva is gone, Admiral. Complete orbital bombardment. No survivors detected. The hegemony isn't just making demands, they're making examples. So I've gathered." Cross turned to face the assembled captains and commanders. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear doesn't leave this room. Project Nightfall is now active." The holographic display shifted, revealing something that made several officers gasp. Scattered throughout the outer systems, hidden in asteroid fields and nebular clouds, dozens of ships appeared on the tactical map, ships that hadn't been there moments before. "For the past decade, we've been building a ghost fleet," Cross continued. "Stealth frigates, cloak destroyers, shadow carriers, every ship equipped with quantum-dampening fields and adaptive camouflage. The hegemony thinks we're defenseless. They're about to learn otherwise." Later, in the quiet of James's quarters aboard the station, Nora sat on the edge of his bed, her hands shaking as the adrenaline finally wore off. The confident captain was gone, replaced by a woman haunted by memories of flames and screaming. "Talk to me," James said softly, settling beside her. His presence was warm, solid, real in a universe that suddenly felt far too fragile. "I keep seeing their faces," Nora whispered. "The people we couldn't save. My parents." Her voice broke and James pulled her against his chest, feeling her tears soak through his uniform. "You can't save everyone." "Nora, but you can make sure this doesn't happen again." She pulled back to look at him, her green eyes fierce despite the tears. "Promise me something, James. Anything. When we go into battle, and we will go into battle, promise me you'll come back." I can't lose you too." Instead of answering with words, James cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative. 3 years of unspoken feelings finally breaking free. Then she kissed him back with desperate intensity, her hands fisting in his shirt as if she could anchor herself to this moment, to him. They made love that night with the tenderness of first times and the desperation of last times, their bodies speaking what their hearts had been too afraid to say. In the darkness between the stars, with war looming and death waiting, they found something worth fighting for. Meanwhile, in the depths of a hegemony dreadnought, intelligence officer Zara Venth reviewed the latest reports from the human sectors. Unlike her colleagues, she took no pleasure in the images of burning colonies. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the dim light as she studied the tactical data. Something was wrong. The human response, or lack thereof, didn't match their psychological profiles. Where were the panicked transmissions? The desperate pleas for mercy? The chaotic evacuation attempts? Instead, there was only silence. A silence that felt less like fear and more like preparation. Zara had served in 17 conquest campaigns. She knew the signs of a broken species, and humanity wasn't showing them. They were showing the signs of something far more dangerous. Patience. Her fingers traced over the reports of human fleet movements, or rather, the lack of movements. Ships weren't fleeing the outer rim, they were simply disappearing. Patrol routes went silent. Merchant vessels vanished without distress calls. It was as if humanity was pulling back into itself, drawing in its breath. A chill ran down Zara's spine as she remembered an old Vorthak proverb, "Beware the prey that stops running." It has remembered it has teeth. Back on Luna Base, Nora stood in the observation dome, watching Earth turn slowly below. James joined her, their fingers intertwining as they watched their homeworld, beautiful, blue, and utterly defenseless if they failed. "Do you think we can win?" she asked. James was quiet for a long moment. "I think we'll do what humans have always done when someone threatens our home. We'll fight like hell and make them regret ever hearing our name." Nora smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. The hegemony wanted humanity to kneel. Instead, they're about to learn why the galaxy used to whisper warnings about us. Below them, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, oblivious to the storm gathering in the darkness. But in the shadows between the stars, ghost ships powered up their engines and checked their weapons. The silence was ending. The storm was about to begin. The tempest builds, the hegemony dreadnought. Worldbreaker cut through space like a blade of darkness and gold, its hull bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon. General Thylos Rex stood on its bridge, his massive form a testament to hegemony genetic enhancement, nearly 3 meters tall, with armor like scales and 4 arms that could crush steel. "Status report," Rex commanded, his voice a rumble that made the deck plates vibrate. 71 hours since the ultimatum," Commander Korthak replied, unable to hide his nervous energy. Still no response from the human leadership. Their outer rim has gone completely silent. Silent? Rex turned all 6 eyes toward his subordinate. Define silent. No communications, no ship movements, no sensor readings. It's as if they've simply vanished. For a moment, Rex said nothing. In his centuries of conquest, he'd seen species react to hegemony ultimatums in many ways: panic, desperate bargaining, futile resistance. But silence? That was new. Perhaps they're preparing to surrender, Korthak suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it himself. Perhaps, Rex mused, or perhaps we've underestimated our prey. Deep in the ship's intelligence section, Zara Venth made her choice. The reports before her painted a picture that terrified her, not because humanity was strong, but because they were patient. Every instinct she'd developed over years of warfare was screaming that her people were walking into a trap. She encrypted a single message burst and sent it toward the Centauri sector, knowing it would likely be her last act as a hegemony officer. The message contained every tactical detail she could access: fleet positions, command codes, shield frequencies. If humanity was preparing to fight back, she would give them every advantage she could. Aboard the UES Phantom, now hidden in the shadow of Saturn's rings, Nora received Zara's transmission with a mixture of surprise and wariness. "It could be a trap," James warned, studying the intelligence data. "Why would a hegemony officer help us?" "Because she's seen what I've seen," Nora replied, thinking of burning colonies and screaming civilians. Sometimes conscience wins over conditioning. The data Zara provided was invaluable: shield harmonics, weapon specifications, command ship identification codes. But more than that, it revealed the true scope of the hegemony force bearing down on Earth: over 2,000 ships, including planet crackers and stellar bombardment platforms. "My God," James breathed. "They really mean to wipe us out completely." "Then we make sure they never get the chance." Nora activated her command console. "All Nightfall units, this is Blackwood. Implement Ghost Protocol. It's time to remind the galaxy why they used to fear us." Across human space, hidden ships began to move. The Ghost Fleet that had been hiding in asteroid fields and nebular clouds for over a decade finally emerged from the shadows. Stealth frigates that could slip past any sensor. Cloaked destroyers armed with weapons that could tear through hegemony shields. Shadow carriers launching squadrons of fighters that appeared on no tactical display. Humanity had been building for this moment, not conquest, not expansion, but the single devastating blow that would end any threat to their homeworld. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath the Rockies, Admiral Cross watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Every ship, every weapon, every carefully planned strike had been designed for one purpose: to hit so hard and fast that no enemy would ever threaten humanity again. "Ma'am," her aide reported, "all units report ready. The hegemony fleet will reach Earth's outer defenses in 18 hours. "Then we have 18 hours to become something they'll never forget," Cross replied. Meanwhile, Zara Venth sat in her quarters aboard the Worldbreaker, knowing her betrayal would be discovered soon. She'd made peace with death long ago, but she found herself hoping that humanity would make her sacrifice worthwhile. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Her blood ran cold as she recognized the encryption. It was from human sources. "Officer Venth," the message began, "your warning has been received and appreciated. If you're willing to take a greater risk for peace, be in Shuttle Bay 7 in 1 hour. You don't have to die with them." Zara stared at the message for a long time. A chance at redemption. A chance to live with a species that apparently valued conscience over conquest. She began packing immediately. As the hegemony fleet approached Earth, confident in their overwhelming numbers, they had no idea that humanity's response wasn't surrender or panic. It was something far more dangerous, calculated fury backed by a decade of preparation. The trap was set. The players were in position, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, Captain Nora Blackwood held Lieutenant James Rivera's hand and whispered a promise that would echo across the galaxy. They wanted to test humanity. Now they'll learn what that really means. When thunder breaks, the hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of locusts, their ships blotting out the stars around Earth. General Rex stood on his command bridge, surveying the blue world that would soon be ash, satisfaction coursing through his veins. "Deploy planet cracker formation," he commanded. "I want this world to understand what defying the hegemony costs." But as his 2,000 ships moved into bombardment formation, something impossible happened. The space around them exploded into fire. From the asteroid belt, from the shadows of Jupiter's moons, from the void itself, human ships materialized like wraiths given substance. The Ghost Fleet struck with precision that bordered on the supernatural, every shot calculated, every maneuver planned, every target prioritized. "Contact!" Korthak screamed as his sensor array lit up with impossible readings. "Ships everywhere. How did they—" His words were cut off as a spread of human torpedoes punched through his flagship's shields, reducing the bridge to molten metal and screaming. Captain Nora Blackwood felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders as the Phantom led the first wave. "All ships engage at will. Remember, we don't stop until they remember why the galaxy used to warn about us." The UES Phantom dove through the enemy formation like a shark through a school of fish. Its weapons, upgraded with a decade of secret research, carved through hegemony shields as if they were paper. Behind her, James coordinated the stealth squadrons, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "Ghost Leader to all units," he transmitted. "Execute pattern Delta 7. Hit their command ships first." What followed wasn't a battle. It was a masterclass in human warfare. Where other species might have met the hegemony head-on, humanity struck from unexpected angles. Ships appeared from quantum shadows, fired devastating volleys, then vanished before return fire could find them. General Rex watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet began to disintegrate. These weren't the desperate defenders he'd expected. These were predators, and his forces were the prey. "How many ships do they have?" he roared. "Unknown, sir," his tactical officer replied, voice cracking. "Our sensors can't track them. They appear, fire, and disappear. Impossible. Deploy the stellar bombardment platforms." But even as the massive weapon systems swung toward Earth, human strike teams were already aboard them. Zara Venth, now wearing a human uniform, led one such team through the corridors of a planet cracker. "This way," she urged the human Marines following her. "The reactor controls are just ahead." She'd made her choice when the human shuttle had picked her up from the world breaker. Now she fought alongside the species she'd helped save, her intimate knowledge of hegemony technology proving invaluable. The planet cracker shuddered as its reactor went critical, joining dozens of others in spectacular explosions that lit the void like newborn stars. Aboard the Phantom, Nora felt a grim satisfaction as enemy ships burned around her. Each explosion was justice for New Geneva, for the 17 colonies, for every innocent life the hegemony had snuffed out. "Captain," James reported, "enemy formation is breaking up. They're trying to retreat." "Let some of them go," Nora commanded, echoing an ancient human strategy. "Make sure they can carry the story back." The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The hegemony had brought overwhelming numbers. Humanity brought overwhelming fury. Ship after ship fell to human precision, until the proud fleet that had arrived to crack a world was reduced to burning wreckage and fleeing survivors. General Rex, his flagship crippled and his fleet shattered, found himself surrounded by human vessels. Their weapons were trained on him, but they held their fire. A transmission came through on all frequencies. Captain Blackwood's face appeared on his screen, her green eyes hard as emeralds. "This is Captain Nora Blackwood of the United Earthship Phantom," she said, her voice carrying across space with the weight of absolute authority. "You came here to destroy us. Instead, you've learned something the galaxy forgot. Humanity doesn't seek war, but when war finds us, we end it." Rex tried to speak, to threaten, to maintain some semblance of the arrogance he'd carried into human space. But the words died in his throat. Around him, 2,000 ships had been reduced to less than 200 fleeing survivors. "Carry this message back to your empire," Nora continued. "Humanity offers peace to all who come in peace. But threaten our worlds, harm our people, or test our patience, and you'll face the same fate." There will be no second warning. The transmission ended. The human fleet held formation for one long, terrible moment. A demonstration of the power that could have finished the job, but chose mercy instead. Then they vanished back into the shadows from which they'd come, leaving the hegemony survivors alone with their terror and the knowledge of what they'd awakened. The battle for Earth was over, but the legend of humanity's wrath was just beginning. After the storm 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy had learned to whisper humanity's name with respect rather than mockery. The survivors of General Rex's fleet had carried the story to every corner of known space. The patient species that seemed so peaceful had unleashed a fury that no empire could withstand. Captain Nora Blackwood stood in the observation lounge of Luna Base, no longer hiding her relationship with James Rivera. His arm was around her waist as they watched a ceremony taking place in Earth's orbit, the dedication of the New Geneva Memorial Station, built from the salvaged hull of Rex's flagship. "Do you think it's really over?" James asked, his fingers intertwined with hers. "The shooting war, yes," Nora replied. "But the real victory isn't what we destroyed. It's what we built afterward." She was right. In the months following the battle, dozens of species had approached Earth with diplomatic overtures. Not from fear alone, but from genuine respect for a species that had shown mercy in victory. The hegemony empire itself had collapsed from within as member worlds broke away. Inspired by humanity's example, Zara Venth had become Earth's first alien ambassador, helping to establish the Galactic Cooperation Council, an organization dedicated to preventing the kind of aggression that had led to war. She worked from an office overlooking the Thames, her pale blue skin no longer a mark of the enemy but a symbol of possible redemption. "The latest intelligence reports," she told Nora during one of their weekly meetings. "The few hegemony holdouts are calling for a renewed campaign against Earth." Nora smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Let them come. The galaxy knows what happens when you test humanity now." And it was true. Across 1,000 worlds, the story had grown into legend. Traders told it in spaceports. Soldiers passed it down in barracks. Parents warned their children with it. The quiet species from the blue world had reminded the galaxy of an ancient truth. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't hunt until it has to. On the colony world of New Harmony, built to house refugees from the hegemony's aggression, children played games where they pretended to be human starship captains. They would hide in silence, then spring out with cries of, "Remember New Geneva!" Their parents watched with mixture of amusement and unease, knowing their children were learning the most important lesson the galaxy could teach: never mistake patience for weakness. Admiral Cross had retired to a small farm on Mars, but her final report to Earth Command had become required reading at military academies across human space. "We did not win through superior numbers or technology. We won because we prepared in silence, struck with purpose, and showed mercy in victory. These are the qualities that make us human. Never forget them." The Ghost Fleet itself had become legend. Most of the ships had returned to their hidden bases, their crews sworn to secrecy. But sometimes, deep space traders reported glimpses of dark ships moving between the stars, silent guardians ensuring that humanity's peace would never again be threatened. In the years that followed, no major power dared to challenge Earth directly. A few minor conflicts erupted along the frontier, but they ended quickly when human negotiators would quietly remind aggressors of what had happened to the last empire that underestimated humanity. Nora and James eventually married in a ceremony aboard the Phantom, with Zara serving as maid of honor and Admiral Cross performing the service. Their children would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was respected, where the old warnings were remembered and heeded. But perhaps the greatest victory was the simplest one. On Earth, in a small cemetery overlooking the Pacific, a memorial stood to the victims of New Geneva. The inscription was simple: they did not die in vain. The galaxy learned. And in the deepest archives of a dozen species, the same message was repeated in 100 languages. Do not test the humans. Do not mistake their silence for surrender. Do not awaken their wrath, for when humanity rises in righteous fury, nothing in the stars can contain it. The storm had passed. The galaxy remembered. And in the quiet between the stars, humanity kept watch, patient as always, but ready should anyone else forget the lesson written in fire and fury across the void. Peace, it seemed, was something worth fighting for after all.